A judge sent a security guard who shot and killed a man to prison. Thanks for joining us at 5. I'm Denise Valdez.
I'm David Charnes. This is a story the 8 News Now investigators have followed right from the beginning, first obtaining video, which then became part of the case file.
You know, there's a lot of different angles that you could take a story like this, which of course is a COVID-19 story of a security guard at a 7-Eleven trying to enforce the guidelines of how many people can enter a particular establishment at one time. Of course, you have the social distancing and the mask requirements, and the fact that all of this was arbitrarily thrust upon businesses and whatnot in a time of absolute panic, of course, is going to lead to absolutely devastating results. You can also talk about the idea of hiring an armed female security guard to be at a 7-Eleven when a regular ordinary guy, who by the way turned out to be a drug user, is too much for her to actually engage with without the use of her firearm. But fundamentally, I think the key aspect of this story that's absolutely crucial is the fact that this woman was just completely and wildly irresponsible with her firearm. I mean, again, if you look at some of the still images involved in this particular case, you could see her pointing the gun or holding it up to this man's face as she's trying to get him out of the store. And considering that the use of deadly force is supposed to be in response to a felony, a threat of serious bodily injury, or deadly force being thrown in your direction, this is just wildly inappropriate. So the conviction and sentence that this woman ended up getting is absolutely warranted in my opinion. But we're going to break this down and we're going to talk about this. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Now, this story is from August of 2020, so we are in the height of the pandemic lockdowns, but make no mistake about it, we've seen multiple different instances of the absolutely necessary lockdowns being completely undermined by the Black Lives Matter riots at this period of time. And again, that had been happening consistently for almost 2 months because, again, we're in August, George Floyd died in late May, and this is when we started hearing the double speak about how, oh, the lockdowns are necessary. If you want to go to work, you can't do that. But the protesting of evil white racism is absolutely significantly more important. And as you can see in this particular video, which I've had to chop up and cut a little bit, what they appeared to be trying to do was allow only a few people into 7-Eleven at a time. And the person who ultimately ended up dying was definitely breaking those rules, trying to enter the store, probably because he had some kind of drugs in his system, which we found out through the toxicology report, or because he didn't really care about these lockdowns and restrictions. Now, of course, it's a video from 2020, so you have the very performative mask at the bottom of your chin that's not even covering your face. We learned a lot about masking, the efficacy of masking, and why this was promoted in the years following COVID-19. But the fact is, this is putting regular ordinary people in situations where they have to enforce laws or arbitrary restrictions against other regular ordinary people, and it was bound to lead to some negative consequences like what we saw right here. Now, of course, the victim in this particular case should not have entered the store when he was not permitted to. I understand why her and a 7-Eleven employee who's not armed end up confronting him, but the fact that the gun comes out so quickly and it's waved around and pointed at this guy so many times is just absurd. It doesn't follow basic firearms protocol, and again, this was a disaster waiting to happen.
Judge Tiara Jones sentencing Kasia Mitchell to 5.5 to 14 years in prison for shooting and killing a man while she was working as a security guard. Judge Jones acknowledging this is a difficult case which dates back to the COVID-19 pandemic, but she points to video and the need to protect the public.
And it's not what took place in the store that's the biggest issue. It's what took place outside of the store that's the biggest issue.
Now, the judge right there says that the primary main issue is what went down at the outside of the store after he was already removed, but I think that pulling the gun inside the store is wildly inappropriate for the circumstances that you're currently dealing with. Now, I think I said earlier that Kasia Mitchell was convicted of killing Thomas Martin, the victim at this particular scene. However, I believe she entered what is called an Alford plea, which essentially acknowledges that the prosecution has enough to convict her. However, she says that she is still maintaining her innocence, even though she is going to accept the sentence. So this can be described in other jurisdictions as similar to a no contest plea. I'm sure you guys don't need all of this details and information. However, I don't know if technically calling her convicted when she issued this particular plea is accurate, so I just wanted to make that clarification. But again, the judge comes down on her and says, look, it's what you did outside of the store where you ended up shooting this individual in the chest, but in my opinion, shoving the gun in his face, pointing the gun at his head multiple times while she's trying to push him out with one arm actually makes the pushing less useful. And even though this guy is kind of shoving a little bit, he's not presenting himself as a deadly force threat or a threat of serious bodily injury. Now, of course, in the absolute ridiculousness of the pandemic, people could have argued at the time that because his mask was down and he was violating our social distancing rules that came to us via the great and honorable God King Anthony Fauci, that maybe she was presenting a deadly threat. But in reality, we know that this was a crazily not proportional response. And the fact is, the pandemic incentivized these kind of confrontations and these kind of absurdities. And in this particular case, it ended up resulting in a man's death.
This video shows the moments leading up to Kasia Mitchell shooting and killing Thomas Martin outside a 7-Eleven in August of 2020. Tensions escalate at this Northeast neighborhood convenience store in less than 2 minutes. Mitchell limiting customers due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Martin, frustrated, barges in. Mitchell pulls out a gun. She and another employee remove Martin. She continues to point the gun at him. He slaps it away. The confrontation continues. Mitchell shoots Martin in the chest in front of his longtime partner.
He died in my yard.
Now again, I had to freeze frame a couple of different times on this particular video for you guys due to the fact that I'm not sure if the shoving will count as too much violence for me to be shown. But one of the things that I think is important to highlight is the absolute lack of discipline in the use of this firearm that Kasia Mitchell ended up displaying right here, because she's pointing it at his face. I know a basic rule of firearm safety is don't point the gun at anything unless you intend to kill it. She's also fighting with him. She has her arm fully extended, so the slap away makes sense. But by the end of the particular video, based on what I'm seeing right here, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misinterpreting, she's actually holding the gun sideways, in a hood movie or something. And it just goes to show you that this woman has no comprehension of what she's doing. She also has, again, a full arm extension, which makes your gun more vulnerable to be getting taken. And if this guy were a serious, legitimate threat, he could easily disarm her if that was his actual intent, but it seems like he's put off by the idea that this woman is putting the gun on him. Now again, her and the 7-Eleven employee were successful in getting him out of the store, but she decided to shoot him anyway. Maybe it was an accidental discharge due to a lack of trigger discipline, and now a man is dead based on a ridiculous restriction that was enforced in an absolutely terrible way when this did not need to happen.
Prosecutors and Mitchell's defense team give two different versions of what happened.
I was asking myself, why was there even an arrest?
Her attorneys point to Martin's toxicology results showing he had methamphetamine in his system.
Now look, I also want to be as fair as humanly possible and point out that in this particular portion of the surveillance video where this guy is lingering around the door, he has some unusual atypical hand movements that may indicate that he's high on drugs. Maybe in the moment we actually had Kasia Mitchell see that he was high on drugs and that heightened her level of concern. But again, it's really the lack of firearm discipline, and again, the shooting him after he was already pushed out of the store and intimidated out of the store by the firearm that really makes this a major issue. Now, of course, this is not the same thing as a premeditated first-degree murder where the sentence would be life in prison. That's why you have a sentence that ranges from 5 to 14 years. And of course, if she was held in jail pre-trial for all this time leading up to this particular plea, she will get a huge amount of credit of time served. But I do think it is important to shame this kind of behavior, to punish this woman with real prison time due to the fact that a man is dead based on her admittedly firing a shot that she did not intend to leave her firearm.
He died in my yard. And then she continued to
looked at me and told me to get off of 7-Eleven property.
Now, to be clear, this guy was acting erratically. It is not unusual for the girlfriend of a drug addict or a drug user to be a drug addict or a drug user herself. However, this woman claims that she discharged the firearm accidentally. She did not intend for that bullet to leave the gun. And then she orders the girlfriend, who's trying to be with her boyfriend in his last moments of life, to get off the property after firing the gun. Now, of course, this could be adrenaline. People don't think the most clearly in these particular situations, and a whole host of other factors, but in reality, this case is just disgusting and tragic, honestly, and again, the result of the insane mindset we were under, or many people were under, during the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns that are associated with the early part of the pandemic.
Prosecutors say Mitchell shouldn't have pulled out a gun, and they point to this.
Ain't no stop hit me with a bottle.
First exposed by the 8 News Now investigators, showing Mitchell's interaction with a woman in the store parking lot.
We learn about another video, an uncharged act from 19 days before, where we watch Miss Mitchell treating another customer like an animal.
Now, the prosecution ends up bringing in another video of another incident where this same security guard is holding down a blonde woman, possibly drug addicted, by her hair in the parking lot in the gas station area of the 7-Eleven and striking her with the other hand. And this shows a pattern of aggression according to the prosecution. I put up the still image for you guys right there. It is not a good look. This was from 19 days earlier. And of course, the prosecution used this to push forward the idea that this woman has problems, does not have the discipline to be a security guard, and maybe if that incident were charged, we would not have ended up with this incident where somebody ended up dying. But again, you could take your thoughts related to that on your own, but what I want to know is what you think about that case, and of course, the main case that we're talking about right here. Is him entering in violation of the COVID protocols enough for him to be thrown out of the store? In my opinion, yes, even though the COVID protocols were ridiculous and absurd. The fact is, if the store doesn't want you in, you should not go in. But should she have pulled the firearm? Should she have discharged the firearm? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a COVID era killing that finally ended up seeing a resolution. Till next time.